I liked the look of it. Initially, I was excited, and then I rewatched the trailer a few different times, trying to see if there was any sort of hint about what modding could be like for this game. But doing that, I had to look closely, and the closer I looked, the more problems I found. So, without any further delay, we're going to go through the trailer bit by bit, and I'll break down all the problems I see from a modder's perspective. If you want to see the full video uninterrupted, I'll leave a link in the description to the trailer's channel. So, without any more delay, let's get into the video.
Behind all great discoveries lies a journey.
Okay, I gotta make one mention of this. This is annoying to me, but in the background, I don't know if that's supposed to be the truck idling or if it's supposed to be the drone's fans. But if it's the drone's fans, it sounds like a Cummins diesel. That's either the biggest and most powerful drone on the face of the earth, or somebody needs to change out audio. Just a little pet peeve. Nothing really related to gameplay, but we'll get to the gameplay stuff here in a second.
One of
And here we go. First and foremost, two things I notice. There's actually three things I notice right off the bat in this picture. Number one, the tires on this little Scout are from the Con 39 Marshall. This annoys me because Snowrunner's been out for 3 years. This is plenty of time for the developers to go and get new tire models or create new tire textures. And just for everybody's edification, a good chunk of the base game truck tire models, they don't actually have modeled treads. They all use an image texture. And basically they do some coding tricks to it to make it look like it's a 3D model. It saves on RAM, but when you look at it from the side, you can see it's definitely a picture and not an actual model tire. So that's the first bad thing I see. The one good thing I see from this is actually the new rim model here. And this is actually a win for the community because I've seen several members across multiple Discord servers asking for new Scout rim models. So at least we have some new Scout rims, even though we have old tire models, which doesn't make sense to me, but I digress. Now, the one technical problem here I see that's going to go unnoticed by a lot of people is this right here. This is the sort of thing that will catch my eye because I make sure this stuff doesn't happen on my trucks. And what we have here, this is the top half, and this is the bottom half of the shock absorber. This is on an IK rigging setup, which basically what IK does is it makes the shock behave realistically. So it's going to compress and extend naturally, just like the real thing would. However, if you don't do it right, you have what's on the screen right now. Basically, the bottom half completely separates from the top half. There's a trick you can do that takes, including all four shocks on this particular vehicle, can be done in less than 2 minutes. So right off the bat, I have some concerns because if this was a 2-minute fix that could have been done, why wasn't it done? Now, the other thing is when this particular trick is done for IK rigging, you can stretch the shock out like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 feet, and it'll never separate. So nobody would be the wiser except, like I say, I happened to catch this when the trailer rolled through on its third or fourth rewatch. Also, you'll see, and I'll point it out in just a second, but this shock is broken too, so it's not unique just to this model.
Anticipation.
Right there, you can see it's starting, and now it's completely separated even on this side. And at this point, actually, it's a good time to pause to call out currently my biggest problem with this new game, and that is the Don. Why is the very first vehicle we see in a new game, a brand new game, a port from Snowrunner. The, this is very concerning to me because, again, 3 years, plenty of time to get new models, plenty of time to even make up fantasy brands. And instead, we have probably one of the least favorite scouts in in Snowrunner as the very first thing we see welcoming us to the new game. This is very concerning to me based on that. Furthermore, we look it over and we see, ignoring the new add-ons, it's the exact same model, suspension, tires, suspension height, body model, as was in Snowrunner. In the space of 3 years, this could have been converted or replaced with a four-door sedan or a station wagon body. So basically the same thing, but just stretched out to be a station wagon. I personally don't like this because right now it makes me feel like I'm looking at a trailer for a Snowrunner DLC, not a sequel game. Also, with how relatively, compared to rigging a truck, easy it is to add brand new add-ons like this to Snowrunner, it feels like we're seeing an ad for new parts coming to Snowrunner and not for an entirely new game. So that's the next problem I see.
Adaptation.
And once again, this scene here, we see the KRS Bandit, minus its crane. I don't know if we'll even see cranes in this game. I imagine we will. But for whatever reason, there are no crane trucks present in the trailer at all. But again, we have new add-ons, the roof rack here, and the flatbed. But again, we can see the return of a Snowrunner model, the whole Bandit body, chassis, everything, and the Tega tires. The wonderful cheater Tega tires from the start of Snowrunner. Also, if you take a look around at the expanded scenery, the trees, the riverside, or the shoreside, I guess I should say, and this little pattern right back here. All of this is currently present in Snowrunner, basically in this exact same pattern and color scheme. Like the reeds, the grass, the trees, nothing strikes me as different from Snowrunner. So again, looking at this, my first thought is I'm looking at a trailer for either a Snowrunner add-on or maybe even for a relaunch of the game.
Of struggle.
Now this is another spot I actually found with some things I liked versus some things I didn't like. So starting off with what I liked is we have the mud caking onto the tires realistically. This I've seen trucks hit muddy areas and come away with their tires covered in mud just like this. So to me, it's nice to see this bit of realism on the tires. Now, that being said, this could be prevalent in Snowrunner 2, or present in Snowrunner 2. Most of the time when I'm on Snowrunner, I'm modding the game, so making sure my truck works and spawns and drives around and everything. So in large part, I haven't really hit the mud recently in a truck in Snowrunner, so I can't remember if this is actually present in the current game. If it is, and you guys have seen it, comment down below, let me know. Now, the other thing I don't like here is, I know this is on leaf springs, but it should have some flex. So this tells me that the Yar's suspension is, just like in Snowrunner, it's stiff as a 2x4. So that's another problem I see with the game. Now, one thing I do find curious is we have what appears to be a closed mirror here. Now, I'm not going to pass judgment on this one just yet, because I don't know if the mirror on the current Snowrunner model is closed like this. I think I drove the Yar once when the game launched, and that was it. So since it's closed, it could be we're seeing a power folding mirror in the game, which would be certainly an interesting little add-on, but I don't know if that's what we're going for here. I don't know if the mirror is closed on the present ER model. Um, but it's, again, something interesting to note, that, and something that caught my eye. I do like the scattered jerry cans, I guess would be the term for them. But again, this is something that could have been added to Snowrunner quite easily. So far, not too impressed beyond the mud appearing on the tires this way. Anyway. And once again, a recurring problem. The exact same Snowrunner model present in this game. We have a few desert maps by... I know we have a good one by Pixel Monkey Desert Basin. And my immediate thought seeing this is that I'm looking at a picture for the Desert Basin mod map. And again, having the Snowrunner model of the Scout really doesn't help that perception. And again, we can see present on the Snowrunner Scout, we've got a new snorkel model and new sidestep models. That's it. So far, really, based upon this, I'm underwhelmed by what I'm seeing. The textures, again, don't look too different from some mod maps in Snowrunner. So again, based on the Scout, I'm looking at the rest of the picture and thinking, okay, I'm in a Snowrunner mod map. I will say too, though, I can see the dirt caked or the mud caked on the tires of the Scout here. So whatever that was, it wasn't unique to the YAR model. But moving on.
Of hope.
And again, looking at this sequence here, I can see pretty much this, again, looks like a hybrid of several mod maps as well as several default maps. Like there's a waterfall in Michigan somewhere. There's a loop around like this in Kola Peninsula in the Amandra map, and in, I think, the third Alaska map. But overall, this particular pattern gives me serious... Like, looking at it, I'm thinking I'm seeing the Wisconsin map, but with those other elements from mod maps and from the other default maps sitting in and rearranged. And now we come to probably one of the most unique features for this game, or probably so far the only unique feature, and that is the Volkswagen Beetle-sized drone. I have several questions about this. First and foremost, if this is supposed to be carried by a Scout, one word: how? This thing is not going to fit into the International Scout 800. I'll spare you running down the list of all the Scout vehicles in Snowrunner, but the only way this thing is going to fit on any vehicle is on the back of like a 6x6 or some type of flatbed. It's huge. I mean, I like the fact that we can run the drone up and look around the area, but if we're supposed to be scouting and we have to carry this thing with us, that means we're going to have to do the same thing we do in Snowrunner now, which is we have a little Scout to go ahead around the areas, but also have some type of large, heavy-duty off-road rig to carry this thing around. So, other than that, just some new models sitting around. And again, looking at these for size reference, you can see this is massive. Like right here too, you've got a workstation for either repairing the drone or modifying it. So again, we can see this thing is pretty big. And for carrying it around or for exploration, not really feasible. And again, here we have your standard Snowrunner recovery missions, and you probably heard it just before I paused the video, but you even have the same sound effects carried over from Snowrunner when you discover a new objective. Ah, didn't pause it in time. Hold that thought. So now right here we have something interesting. Originally when I saw this, I thought that we were looking at potentially animal tracks, but in reality, these are probably like some type of fossilized footprints looking at them, given that we're supposed to be on a exploration or museum or archaeological, excuse me, uh, mission here. You'll notice up in the upper right here in a few minutes that it seems like for the from the story aspect of things, we're working for a museum this time around. Anyway, we'll move on and get to that part now. Also, a little side note, we've got entirely Xbox oriented controls here.
Each
And then we have standard areas we'll find around the map. I'm not quite sure what these are. I'm pretty sure everybody knows what this is a reference to. And I do want to give some kudos to devs for throwing that in there.
depth matters.
And once again, we're back to the Scout 800 model. And right here shows the one thing I've hated about the Scout model since Snowrunner launched. And that is those disgusting leaf springs. I know that the Scout 800 in real life came with a spring under suspension, but something went haywire in the construction of this model, and these things are just stretched like awful rubber bands. And it honestly kind of hurts my eyes to look at. Anyway, that being said, we'll move on here because there's nothing else really to see on the Scout aside from the dirt on the rims, the dirt on the body, and we do have some new bumpers, but again, that is that overlapping the default. Oh, good grief, I see some problems now. That might be overlapping the default Scout stock bumper, but right here, this design is, I hope, going to be changed before the game launches. The bumper is clipping into the leaf springs. Yeah, that's not a good start, guys. There was there was already the IK issues, which again, right there, you can see the shock separating. And now we have the springs clipping into the bumper. Yeah, not a good start.
For every obstacle.
And this time we can see from the back of the Scout, we've got a large, I don't know if that was intended to be a spare tire holder or like a luggage, additional storage capacity for like fuel and repairs. It might be too that this was intended to be what carries the drone, but based on how big that drone was, it would probably be up here normally, and it would wipe out that whole roof rack. It's that big. And again, we've got basically nothing new in the terrain. I don't recognize the buildings right off as being carryovers from Snowrunner, but it wouldn't surprise me.
There's a solution.
One thing I do notice about this area, right as you enter the second map for the Wisconsin DLC, there's this one, you can get to it pretty quickly if you have a mod truck, especially one of mine since they just plow over trees. But there's this area running right along the shore of the river, and there's a cutover to a little island just like this, and a rocky hillside, basically like what you see right here. I'm curious now if this is actually the Wisconsin map, which would be more than a little interesting to see a SnowRunner map reappear, as well as SnowRunner vehicles. Other than that, there's not too much else to see here, aside from now we've got the Dawn model back, and we're seeing it from a different angle this time, so we can see the spare tire holder, and we can see spare fuel and repair parts flanking the spare tire. The other thing we get to see is we've got oversized fender flares, and we've got a massive sidestep, which I don't remember if the Dawn even came with sidestep options. I know it didn't have fender flares, certainly not ones this big. But again, these are all parts that could have been added to the default model in Snowrunner, and especially too, since if this is like what I think it is, the Wisconsin map, then this is even more of an issue than I thought. And now we have a good look actually at one of the few new features for this game that actually I'm pretty excited about. And that is this guy right here. We have a portable winch anchor point for this new game. The reason this is significant is, as everybody who's used my trucks know, you can reach over to a winch point 2 counties away. And I do that because my trucks, when they do flip over, usually they flip over when they're just that much away from a winch point, so I tried to have this set up as a way to get the truck flipped over without having to recover. But with this winch point being portable, I can just have it plunk into the ground wherever the truck flips, so I won't have to have a 2 mile long winch line. So that'll be good for console players. And again, I didn't stop it at the right point, but we've got, again, the default. I don't remember what this thing is called. I know it appeared with the Cola DLC, but it's again the Snowrunner model right out of the Cola Peninsula. And we've got what seems to be an AEV-inspired sideboard or flatbed. Not really good for hauling cargo from the look of it, but certainly more exploration-oriented. And again, we're crawling up a rocky area, and there's no winch points around except for that little winch point, except for that little anchor that apparently we can carry around now. And this one, this honestly, the more I look at it, kind of makes me think of Tennessee. And there's a few things to note here. I'll roll it forward real quick. First and foremost, we're inside the cab of a military truck, and in this case, it's the AMK MK38 civilian. And we can see a few different things from this angle. Number one, full interior, to be expected. And we've also got the jerry cans on either side of the hood. But what's harder to notice is this gigantic, I don't know if you would call it a crash bar or a roll bar, that covers the entire cab. So again, we have some parts that could have been added to the base game of Snowrunner without having to come to an entirely new game for them. And now too, we see, again, a different, probably the same one, but just with a different paint job, KRS Bandit being towed by the R87. The other thing I notice is we've got the seismic vibrator add-on from Snowrunner present immediately into the game. This is another potential problem I see, because if it transferred that easily and all the coding and everything to make it work transferred over to, again, why are we looking at a whole new game with basically just custom add-ons for default trucks that is at its core Snowrunner? Anyway, on to the next part. And again, that same Yar and Bandit from a different perspective, and we've got the winch, 20-meter length, 15,000-pound capacity, waterproof. Okay, so just like previous iterations of the game. Actually, we see here now, looking at the Yar's model, I could be wrong, but I think that mirror is open now. Maybe it does fold in and out.
For every task, a tool.
And now, once again, we're coming to an add-on that existed in Snowrunner in the form of the metal detector, except it's been redesigned and been made optional for scouts instead of being confined to heavy semis. Again, something that could have been added to Snowrunner with either a DLC or just as a quality of life improvement. The other thing we see is we now get a good side profile of the Don and can see its fender flares, that huge step, and the various jerry cans and repair parts add-ons. Again, all cosmetics that could have been added to the game. Again, too, we also see the desert map we seem to be in, which mod maps, anyone? Also, we've got the same driver model. There's actually a lot to process on this particular part of the screen, or I should say this particular part of the trailer. So I'll go over them from most impressive to least impressive. First and foremost, the most impressive part is the return of the water depth gauge from MUDRUNNER and spin tires. Now, frankly, OG players from spin tires and MUDRUNNER will remember that as soon as you open the map, if you were near a body of water, you would get these little icons, like these little green arrows here, that would give you some indication of how deep the water was. So you could tell if it was a couple inches or like 20 feet deep and sink your truck. That was, for some strange reason, absent in Snowrunner. But as you can see, it's now returned for this new game, but with a twist. Instead of being on the map, it's an add-on on the truck. Now, I don't know if it's this roof-mounted add-on on the Scout or if it's something inside. There's not enough information in the trailer to tell, but again, it's a curiosity that since we have basically the Snowrunner engine and graphics from the look of things, which, quick disclaimer, I don't know if this is the same physics engine that Snowrunner runs on, but given how similar it looks, it's a safe assumption that it's either the same engine or a heavily upgraded version to handle new graphics. Which, even then, those new graphics don't look too dissimilar from what we have in Snowrunner presently. So now we'll move over to, actually, we'll address this here. Skeletal Riches, the mission that this particular player is doing in the video. Get digging tools, quest item, all that stuff. But the important part is here, Arizona, and you're gonna have to, I could blow it up. I'm not sure how though. But if you zoom in or look closely at your screen, you'll see that it says Arizona National Museum. I think that says National. I just got close to my own screen to look at it. So we can confirm we're in Arizona for this new game at least some of the time. And there's actually another sequence coming up in a few minutes where it'll pop up and we'll see that we're working in Arizona for the Arizona Museum. So now we come over to, since I was just gesturing over here, the UI on this side. Now, we'll start out with the basic stuff. We've got damage meter and a fuel gauge. So damage meter for tires, transmission, engine, fuel tank, suspension, all the standard stuff we're used to for Snowrunner, but in a different pattern and format. This is actually reminiscent of an early design for Snowrunner prior to its release. Now we have over here too the left bumper button. I presume it has something to do with the fuel gauge and all this other stuff here, but I don't know at present. Now, the other thing we see is this little gauge here. To be perfectly honest with you, I have no idea what that does. When I saw it originally, I thought it was a temperature gauge for the differentials being locked, which it seems we can unlock and lock the differentials on the Scout this time. But as you can see, the four-wheel drive system is not engaged, but just the differentials. So I thought originally it could be that, but watching later on when the Con 39, when the Con 39 Marshall was being driven, the same gauge is there, and the needle is pegged right along the red line. So I'm left wondering what exactly this is. Is this an engine temperature gauge? Is this a tachometer? And if so, what effect does it have? Because if you come over here, you can see the transmission, auto 2 out of 4, and the standard Snowrunner high, reverse, neutral, low 1, 2, and 3. And then the standard, of course, auto. So I'm not sure what this gauge is, and also based on this particular gauge pattern, I don't think we're getting a manual transmission option, but if this is a tachometer, that could indicate we will see a manual transmission option in the future. We'll have to wait and see for more gameplay videos and an actual gameplay walkthrough instead of snippets from a trailer like this. So now we come to the last two parts of this. Also, we have RB down here underneath the transmission, so I'm wondering if RB is now our clutch. Like, if you've been driving in Snowrunner and going into the low gears at all, you know you have to press and hold the left bumper and then move the right thumbstick around to select your gears. So considering RB is right underneath the transmission pattern, I have a feeling that's our shift gauge, which will be awkward, but I have to wait and see. The only other things that are worth note here are when you hit left on the D-pad, you get the devices option versus right, and you get the inventory option. I don't know what either of these do. Devices, I would assume, would be something like the depth gauge here, along with the seismometer, among other options that we have for the scouts now. Inventory, I don't know if that's supposed to be repair parts, or since there's something said on the Steam page about hiring your own crew of researchers, maybe this consists of, say, for example, resources, consumables, if you will, food, water, etc., for the driver or for your research crew. Again, only time will tell what those are. And as you can see, we can still sync in the game, but we've also got a progressive depth system with this new, or not new, but returning depth finder. And there's not much to say here, really, except we've got another Bandit. I always forget the name of that truck. With a honestly aggressive looking body cage, and the flatbed on this is interesting to me because the look and design of it strikes me as it's intended to be a rollback truck, or at the very least capable of transporting a scout that can go deeper and further into the backcountry than the Bandit itself can. So other than that, I'm not seeing too much on the Bandit to make note of. The only other thing would be we've got the little camp here, which at first glance I thought it was a UFO. Now, that being said, we've also got the fire pit and the camp chairs, which those are present currently in Snowrunner. I know there's a spot just overlooking the first Michigan garage that has pretty much that exact model, maybe a different color option. I think green chairs instead of blue. But again, is this another Snowrunner port over? I couldn't tell you for sure. And now we've got, again, one of the more interesting parts of the trailer to me. Once again, we know for sure the Con 39 Marshall is confirmed to be in the game, and it's probably going to be one of the trucks we get at launch. Maybe even a pre-order truck. I don't know. But regardless of that, we have an interesting set of options. We've got the roof rack installed on the truck, but now we can actually pick and choose which add-ons go on the roof rack. So we can choose to have, it looks like there's 6 slots. So we can have a 50-50 split. We can have 3 fuel tanks, three spare fuel tanks, and 3 sets of repairs. Or if you drive like I do, you'll have one set of you'll have 1 spare fuel and you'll have 5 repair points. And then in the miscellaneous and the sideboard parts here, I presume that too is for the extra add-on slots, so you can fill with either fuel or repair parts. So the fact that we've got basically a subfolder, if you will, of add-ons that we can put in the roof rack is honestly, it's a pretty intriguing idea. And from an exploration standpoint, or to pull the name of the game, an expeditionary standpoint, it makes perfect sense. So then going through the rest here, we've got the standard stuff we're used to. We've got paint, and we've got the mechanical aspects of things. and then stock front bumper, rims, all this other stuff that we're used to from Snowrunner. It's basically the Snowrunner UI, but highly polished, which honestly I kind of like how it looks. It looks cleaner, neater, and I guess you might say a little bit more updated. And again, not too much to say here about the truck, but we've got the same little Don, and it's got the new roof rack, fuel tank, all that other good stuff. Ah, actually, here we go too. Frame modules. It looks like we've got flatbeds coming back. Whether or not they'll be useful, time will tell. And again, we've got interior options, mechanical options, paint options, all the usual stuff we're used to. Now, what I want to take a second to talk about is the background. This is, again, oh, Don 71, that's what this thing is called. But in the background, we can see the fully furnished and sparkling clean garage, which to me, when I was looking at this earlier, I started wondering, okay, we have the same camera angles and pattern and theme of the Snowrunner garage returning, just updated and polished and cleaned up. So the thought process being, since maybe this was like a story-driven game. Originally, the whole story for Snowrunner was you play as a driver who, from the look of things, travels the world, helping restore various damaged areas following natural disasters. So I'm wondering now, too, if this is supposed to be, from a story standpoint, a sequel game where the driver has made it, if you will. Where he's got his own shop now, it's all cleaned up, it's all shined up, and it's all organized, and he's now going around working in the backwoods on expeditions, hence the title, for various companies. Again, time will tell on that one. It's just a thought that crossed my mind. Now, the last thing to take note of here is I don't remember the windshield wiper model being present on the Don 71 in Snowrunner. Maybe it was, and I just either got so fed up driving it that I didn't notice, or maybe it wasn't. If you've driven the Don 71 recently and can confirm or deny that this was there, comment below, let me know. And right here, we find one of the locations. We're in Arizona, in the Grand Canyon. And again, we're working for one of the various companies, I presume, again, the Arizona National Museum, and we've got a variety of missions we can do. I don't recall this symbol from Snowrunner, but obviously we've got our contracts, our other jobs. Again, standard Snowrunner fare, but in frankly, a cleaned up UI. And again, you've got all the usual patterns that you're used to from Snowrunner, but again, in a cleaner UI.
For every
And again, now we're back in the map. All this other stuff, and this is what I was referring to earlier about the gauge here. The Con Marshal is in second gear, just like the Scout was, and this little needle is pegged right along, it is pegged right over the red line. So it may well be we've got a tachometer in the game, which would mean we can now change gears. Now, does this indicate a full manual transmission? I really don't know. If it indicated a full manual transmission, I would think we'd have a different shifter layout than what we have now. But again, we're going to have to wait for some actual gameplay footage. And again, we're seeing several rock fixtures that I remember. I remember this one rather distinctly from a few different maps. I think Cola was one of them, but it was differently textured, so it fit into the snow map instead of a hot region like Arizona. There's not too much else to note here aside from the reeds, and these may be new types of plants. I don't know for sure. But anyway, moving on to the next part of the video.
destination. An expedition.
We have what I'm guessing is our general base camp. We've got our 5-slot garage here. We've got these just appear to be props from here I can't tell for sure what this is, and this again just looks like a prop. Now what's interesting to me is we've got this part here that says fuel on it. So we've got a fuel tanker and we've got our garage. So now I'm curious from a gameplay standpoint, are we starting in the garage with, like every time we recover it to the garage, do we get resupplied and restocked with fuel and repair parts? Or do we have to go over to the fuel tank here like we did in MUDRUNNER and fuel the truck up? Again, gonna have to wait for some gameplay footage to see. But so far, it looks just like Snowrunner here, but with some better shadows, brighter lighting, and maybe more vibrant textures. I'm not entirely sure because looking at this, I could again be looking at a Snowrunner mod map. There wasn't too much in that previous little turning sequence. I looked at it several times. But we come here, I'll let this play for like a half a second, but this is my next area where I have some problems. Feel free to rewind and watch this part a few times. But with that sequence, it wasn't so much what was going on in the game itself or in the vehicle itself. It was how slow everything seemed to be moving. So, for example, it felt laggy as the camera was turning, as the vehicle was turning. And my concern on that is, was that lag due to, say, for example, did the person recording have motion blur on? Or was it a heavy breakdown, or was it just a heavy bog down of the CPU and the GPU causing that lag? That's a big concern to me because I don't want to have my graphics card cranked to the max or my CPU using like 100, 150% of its capacity. I don't want my GPU and my CPU using 100% capacity just to run this game. So that's my concern from a technical gameplay perspective on this part here. The only thing really that I noticed here that's worth noting is the Scout, actually. I know it doesn't have its fender flares like it does in some previous videos, or excuse me, previous parts of the video, but it seems to me that the tires stick out further from the axles, further from under the body, than they do in Snowrunner, and than they even did in earlier parts of this trailer. Go ahead and feel free to wind back to when I showed off the Scout, or when, I should say, the Scout was on screen previous to this, and I really don't think that the tires were out that far. Granted, these are the default tires, but even so, since those are, once again, the tire models from Snowrunner, they should be in line with these ones a little more. The other thing I noticed is the mud texture that appears on the tire itself. This seems rather dynamic. Again, I could be wrong, this feature could be present in Snowrunner, and I just haven't hit the mud recently in any truck, default or mod, and haven't noticed it. So now we're getting towards the end of the video, and there's a few things that go by rapid fire, so I'll try and catch them. Again, nothing really spectacular here to see. We've got a supply trailer, or a supply tent, if you will, and that seems to be a workbench of some kind. So that might be where we go for upgrades or to resupply, I don't know. And now we have our first look at the only new vehicle shown off in the trailer. There's a lot to process about this picture, or this clip in the video. First and foremost, this is an armored truck, and I've got to wonder what in the world it's doing out here. Because we're obviously in the Arizona backcountry, so it's like, this doesn't really fit in the theme of an exploration. It's a gigantic, super heavy vehicle. Yes, it's four-wheel drive, but it's heavy and it's going to sink. The other thing would be, I'm not even sure what this is based on. My initial thought was Pterodyne Gurkha, but the headlights are wrong. Actually, those look a little like Oshkosh headlights. If anybody has any idea what this thing is, comment below, let me know. So, whatever it is, it's used up its spare parts here. It's used up either its spare wheel or it's used up its fuel. There's nothing on the roof that I can see, and there was supposed to be something hanging here, but I don't know what it was. I'm just guessing that it was either a tire or a fuel tank. But again, an armored truck was probably one of the last things I expected to see in the default game. Now, for those of you who have noticed it already, I'm going to address the two things I see about the tire. I'll start with the obvious. The rims clearly do not fit the tires. I don't know who let that one by in the office, but that was a pretty big mistake to let slip, guys. So I don't know if the rim was scaled wrong, if the tires were scaled wrong, or if a line of code was mixed up and the wrong rims were applied to the wrong tires, or vice versa. But that's something that can be addressed in code easily enough, or even in rim, or even in modeling, it can be taken care of easily enough. Now, the other thing that caught my eye here is, why do we have snow tires? Why does this thing have snow tires on, like full-on tire chains, the whole 9 yards, in the mud in Arizona? I legitimately have no answer for that one. I will say too, though, I like how the mud does cake up on the wheels and tires like this, particularly on the tires. So maybe it was done to show off the mud's behavior on the tires this time around. But anyway, this is interesting mostly because it's an armored truck in the middle of nowhere, basically. So on to the next one. And here we get a good look up close at the Don with several of its new add-ons. It's got the bumper, the spare tire, spare fuel, the giant fender flares, the little mini antenna, I just noticed that, the running boards, spare tire holder, roof rack, and I'm not sure if this is supposed to be a visor or what. And I don't even know if it's part of the roof rack. It's an interesting concept, but again, I'm really not happy seeing a base game model from Snowrunner sitting here in a brand new game with parts that could just as easily be added to Snowrunner. And here I think we're looking at the Dawn again based on the taillight. And it's going through some pretty deep mud, all things considered. Or maybe that's water, excuse me. And I missed that when it was the Donegan, I think, sitting... No, actually it was the Con Marshall sitting up on the cliff. Yeah, Con 39 Marshall sitting up on the cliff. We've got a little outpost here, it looks like. And dry riverbed, mostly dry riverbed. Not too much else to notice to my eyes. I'm not a SnowRunner mapper, so if any SnowRunner mappers are watching this, if you see anything, feel free, tag me in the comments, let me know. And that's pretty much where the trailer ends. We've got the Little Don sitting up on the cliff overlooking with its new add-ons. I don't know if that's the water depth add-on or not. And then here we have the Yar outfitted with all of its spare parts and spare fuel crawling out of the river. And that's pretty much where the trailer ends. Now, it looks good, it looks interesting, it looks entertaining, but so much of what's there could have been added to SnowRunner as a DLC or even as a quality of life update. So I'm really concerned going forward that what we're seeing isn't actually a new game, it's just a more polished SnowRunner. Now, one other thing to note here is we've got what appears to be a wrecked chopper, definitely a crashed airplane, and that might be a beached ship, I can't tell. And we've got the dinosaur in the wall there. I can't see, there's something back behind here, but I can't see what it is because the text is in the way. So there's a bunch of interesting new features, chiefly that drone and the other various add-ons for the trucks, like the depth meter and a few of the other things. But with so much carrying over from Snowrunner, I'm really concerned that what we're going to see here, including the errors too, from say the R model with the shocks, that all we're going to be seeing is a more polished Snowrunner with all of the underlying Snowrunner problems. Let me know what you think. Time will tell what actually happens, but let's get the conversation going.